I still to this day think that is one of the single best questions I was ever asked. What did you learn? Unexpected things will happen unless you plan for it. So mistakes will happen, not might happen. So be careful.
Hello world and welcome to the Tech Overflow podcast. I'm Hannah Clayton Langton and we are the podcast that explains technology to curious minds. I am without my co-host Hugh Williams, but I have got an extra special guest for us today, Derrick Connell. Derrick started his career at the London Stock Exchange and then spent 28 years at Microsoft in a number of senior roles, most recently as the corporate vice president for search and AI. Derrick now advises technology and product leaders, and I also happen to know he is mad about mountain sports and photography. Derrick's first book is coming out this week, 21 Summers. I had so much fun interviewing Derrick. We had an awesome conversation about innovation and, crucially, when it goes wrong. He's got some awesome insights, so let's get right into it. Derrick Connell, welcome to Tech Overflow.
Thank you so much. I'm an active listener, so it's great to be here in person.
That's what we like to hear. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. You spent nearly 30 years at Microsoft, spanning a period of enormous change. And on Tech Overflow, we've talked before about the different tech eras, starting from personal computing to the internet, through to social media, and now AI. How did that feel for you on the inside at Microsoft?
Well, I started in 1992, so I did live through most of the eras of big change. So the internet came around mid to late 90s, mad period of innovation. And then, Google came late 1999, so search started coming, ads. But I guess the next big one was cloud. Companies like Amazon were born in the cloud. So previous companies were offline companies, real estate, etc. But they were born in the cloud. And then the phone came, 2008, and around the same time as social media. And then later in the 2010s, I guess that's when the early stages of what is now ChatGPT, LLMs, which you've talked about in your previous episodes. But yeah, there's these waves of innovation. It's great, crazy, because you got to hold on, ride the waves, but it was good.
And Microsoft as a business was sort of born out of Windows and Office and then moved into all sorts of things. So when did Microsoft decide to move out of Windows and Office and into what I presume was Bing and beyond?
Well, that would have, it started with the wave of internet. So, before that you had the PC, then the graphical user interface came along with Windows. And then one of the first big applications on Windows was Office, Word, Excel. They were individual products, but then they packaged them as Office. But then the internet came along and, you had Netscape, AOL back in the day. Yeah, so you're going down memory lane.
Yeah, my first email address was AOL.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
A lot of people still have Yahoo addresses or Hotmail addresses.
I must still have mine. I don't know what happens if you just leave them.
It's probably gone.
Okay.
Retired. But that was the, Internet Explorer, that was the first. And Microsoft decided to invest in sort of everything to do with what it meant to be on the internet, cloud computing, search, different way of working, etc. So that's how we got into search, which is where I worked from 2003 onwards. Speaking
of search, we've just done an episode on search and Google now hold over 90% market share. How was it back then? Was it similar? And if so, how did that feel for you guys over at Microsoft?
Well, it was a daunting moment because in 2003, Bill Gates and Steve at the time said, we want to invest in this technology. So it was more of a technology bet. And Bill is, if you know anything about him, he's a long-term thinker. So he thinks about what is this investment going to do for the world, for the company. So search was it. Google were out there. They took all that share away from Yahoo.
Yes, Yahoo. Yeah.
Which you mentioned in your episode, which I really enjoyed. It was that they were really competing, Google versus Yahoo, and Google just had a much better product. And they just introduced a much better way of searching the internet, which you talked about. But that technology, machine learning, big index, big data, crawling the web, that's the technology that Bill wanted Microsoft to have. And the software development that went along with that. Like, how do you build a big cloud service like that? Because it's different to how the rest of the company was working at the time.
Well, and I was going to say, Windows and Excel and Word, that was a CD-ROM based business, I presume, back at the time. And that's quite different to cloud-based search engines.
Yeah, and there was two major differences between the products that Microsoft had at the time and then what was happening on the internet, which then you want to hedge. You want to sort of figure out what happens if the world goes one way or the other. So we were on the new way. But Windows and Office had, the way they were built was this old waterfall technique, which is you figure out up front what the product is. You spend a year, sort of figuring out the specifications. Then you spend maybe 3-4 years building it, testing it. And then at the end, you have a product, you burn it on a CD, or you pre-install it on a PC when you buy the PC. Mm-hmm. And with CDs, you'd send it out to companies, and then the IT department would install it on all the PCs in a company. And that's how software was distributed in the old world before the cloud. But on the internet, different. It's on the cloud, accessible through a browser. And then the way you develop it is what we call agile, where you figure out what you're trying to do. And, for us, it was develop a high quality search experience, and you measure it. You're shipping every day, and you're just putting things out in front of customers, and you're running experiments. And that's the modern way of modern in 2004. Now it's probably, old compared to what we're doing with LLMs and ChatGPT and things like that.
Well, the 4-year horizon is quite jarring, because 4 years ago, had ChatGPT sort of picked up the public consciousness? Probably not even. So you wouldn't want to be planning now for 4 years out. If anything, I think our time horizons get shorter. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, back at the time, think about this. If you started working on a version of Windows in 2004 and you had a 4-year cycle, when you ship it, the world is now on a phone, which when you were specifying that product, the phone didn't even exist. The iPhone wasn't there. Facebook wasn't there. So how could you possibly predict the future? And that's one of the problems with Waterfall, is that it's really hard to predict the future.
So how did Microsoft make that shift of mindset from burning onto CD-ROMs? I bet there's some listeners who won't even know what that means. Yeah. Ask ChatGPT. And something much different. How does that cultural shift happen in practice?
Well, in practice, it didn't. In practice, we were almost like a separate company. So the way Microsoft operated, even now it still operates similarly. You had the Windows group building Windows, shipping Windows, Office, building Office, shipping Office. And then the Bing team, we were in a different building.
Wow.
We were building our own product. We were operating in the new way, the sort of cloud-based agile development. And then, leaders, like I would go talk to my peers in Windows and Office, and we'd share information. But it was very separate.
So you were like in an incubator, essentially.
We were definitely an incubator.
At the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And in that time period of change that we've mentioned, you mentioned that the phone came out, the iPhone or smartphones came out, and that moved us into the world of apps. But what was the innovation that you were building from like a product perspective?
Well, innovation, when we started out in 2004, Google was out there. They had 95% market share, 96% market share on the PC. The phone wasn't even there yet, so phone wasn't a big deal. But they dominated in all the countries around the world. So our job was first just build what Google had. So it took us a few years to do that. And then in 2009, we released Bing to the world, and we had 2% market share, 3% market share. So we were really nothing. And then the goal was, over the next few years, prove that we could gain market share. And we were gaining market share every single month in the US. And, once we passed 10% market share, we were pretty happy, because it's like, okay, this thing is real. But we knew, would we ever really change the behaviors that people go to Google and search on Google? Very, very difficult. So innovation meant, where can you find new opportunities where you can disrupt the market? Because if you try to compete head to head, you might break through, you might get a deal on mobile that you're the default for the Apple phone, which we tried to do. And that was always part of our strategy. But we were out there scanning the market, trying to figure out, are there new ways to give users access to information, which is essentially what a search engine is. And so we were always out there scanning and trying a whole bunch of different things to get access. Like we had a deal with Facebook where we were integrating web search results into the Facebook search experience. I don't know if you even saw that or noticed it. But
I didn't at the time.
Yeah, but that was an example. We were like down in Silicon Valley doing hackathons with Mark Zuckerberg, and he was there for 2 days with us, and we were trying to find ways to innovate and get web search into Facebook, because it's a huge business, search. If Google has 90% share of the search market, $200 billion market, 10% is still a $20 billion revenue business, which is, a pretty decent business by anybody.
Yeah, plenty to go around.
Yeah.
What I'm really fascinated to talk to you about today, spoiler alert, is we talk a lot about innovation and failing fast and risk-taking, which I think when we think about it, or when a company thinks about it, or a leadership team thinks about it, we often think about the happy path, which is you take a risk and it pans out. Or that's at least what you hope for. But sometimes it does fail. And I know that you've got some experience in that. Maybe that's where I'll take us next. But you worked on an early conversational chatbot, also known as Tay, which did turn out to be fairly controversial. Can we talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. In fact, as a listener, I have loved the episodes like the, swipe on Tinder and features that were huge successes. But if you're managing a team of innovation people, you have to look at the spectrum, which is there will be hopefully a hit. And you could do 1,000 experiments, try lots of things like VCs do, and you may never get a hit. But if you get a hit, like, wow, hit, you'll have a lot of stuff in the middle, which no one ever really sees. They don't notice it because they were just experiments you did. They came, they went. And then every now and again, you'll have a failure or something that people notice is a failure. And Tay is an example of that. It has its own Wikipedia page. It's famous.
I have visited the Tay Wikipedia page. Okay, and so let's start with the basics. So what was Tay?
Yeah, so let me take you back in time. Tay was released in 2016. So imagine 10 years ago, people think ChatGPT, conversing with a product that gives you answers is new, 2 years old. But in 2016, in fact, 2015, we had a product in China, which was the earliest version of what we call a conversational product. And what we saw was in China, I visited China quite a bit because I had a team, big research and development team. And when I would arrive in the airport, most people in Western Europe, when you're on the phone, you hold the phone at the side of your head and you're talking to it. So it's fairly clear what you're doing. There was no FaceTime back then. And so you'd arrive in Beijing and you would see people walking around with their phone in front of their face. And straight away, you might think now, you'd say, well, they're FaceTiming. Yeah. That's not what they were doing. What they were doing was they were having conversational input, voice input to WeChat. And so WeChat, for those of you who don't know, is a huge product in China. So think about if you combined Amazon, Twitter, or X as it's known now, Facebook, Zoom, all in one product. So you
everything,
one
right?
app,
yeah.
Everything in that one app. You can book a car, etc. So that's WeChat. And the way you interacted with WeChat was voice. Because in China, typing, because it's a very long language, it's really hard to type. So it's just much easier to talk to it. So we saw people talking to their phone. And when you're innovating, you're always looking for behaviors, things that might change the way people interact with a product, because that gives you an opportunity to do something new.
And WeChat has always been ahead of the game for us. I think I've mentioned on a previous episode, I have a brother that lives in China, been out there, and I've got WeChat because that's how we talk. And 2019, I went out to visit him, and it was mind-blowing to me that not only could he pay, but he was authenticating with his face to pay, which now is normal to us. Right. But they've always been somewhat ahead of us in that respect with regards to innovation. Yeah,
because innovation comes from, at the simplest form, you look for areas where users have problems, and you solve those problems. And so you're in China, typing is a problem, so voice interaction was good enough at that time. It's got better over time as it gets used. So where there's areas of innovation in China is input models. One of those companies introduced WeChat as an innovation. So we're going to try this one app that does everything, and it worked.
Okay, so you go to China, everyone's walking with a phone in front of their face, and you realize that there's a conversational user interaction there, which we've not had on our side of the world. So what does that mean for Microsoft?
So what we thought was, let's do an experiment. Can we build an app that sits inside WeChat that has conversational UI? Now, if you're doing a conversational UI search box, you talk to Hugh about this, you type 2 or 3 words and you get 10 blue links. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking to a device to get information, you're not expecting to get 10 blue links that you type on. You're expecting a conversational answer. So we stretched ourselves and said, I wonder, can we build a product that interacts with you and gives you back answers and can also ask you questions?
Okay.
So it's conversational.
So it sounds quite a lot like ChatGPT or LLMs generally.
Yeah. It's, the 2 parts of ChatGPT are it's conversational UI.
Yeah.
And then it's got this incredible technology for giving you very relevant answers to the thing you asked for. Mm-hmm. So at the time, there was no LLMs, but we tried the ChatGPT UI. We called it Conversation as a Platform. Mm-hmm. So we had the UI working, and then underneath it, we had some machine learned answers to questions. We combined it with search, so we could answer questions like, what's the weather in Beijing? What's the sports results for the local team? But also, because in Beijing at the time, there was a lot of people young people who'd moved from the countryside to work, and they lived in apartments on their own. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of loneliness. People were lonely. So they would talk to this product, Chow Ice, and ask things like, I'm lonely tonight. Do you have any recommendations for how I could meet someone or where I could go to join a club? And then the product was answering. And then what we decided to do was we didn't want it to be question answer one way. We wanted it to be almost like a human conversation, which is every now and again, the product would ask the user a question. how are you feeling tonight? And backwards and forwards. And so that proved to be a huge success.
And this wasn't Tay. This was experimentation.
This was the first, China first.
China first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it worked incredibly well. We ended up with over 100 million daily users in China using this product.
Yeah.
A human conversation has 7 turns. So I ask you something, you ask me something.
On average, you mean? Okay.
And so we were just trying to see, would it work? And the average for Xiao Ice was 23.4 on average. So it was sustaining this conversation backwards and forwards. And the data that we're using was, we sourced, and you talk about training data with LLMs. It was similar. We had training data, which was questions and answers on shopping sites and all kinds of things. We used that to generate Q&A.
And that's fixed training data that you would load in.
We loaded that to bootstrap it.
Yeah.
And then once the model started working, we were getting all of this new training data, which is the questions that the user was asking us, the answer that was given it back. We would ask the user a question and get the answer. So we were getting more and more training data all the time. And then we were using machine learning to make the models better. So huge success. Mm-hmm. So then we thought, why don't we try it in the US? Take our experiment. What could go wrong? And that was Tay.
That was Tay.
Yeah. Same model. So we didn't have WeChat and we didn't have voice. So what we thought was we have Twitter. It's a place where people talk to one another. And we'll do text input to start with. Maybe some people will use voice, but we'll build an equivalent in the US. And we released Tay, I think it was March 2016. And Tay was a product for 18 hours.
18 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. So how quickly did it go wrong?
It went wrong in almost the first hour.
Wow.
Because we made a mistake. We made a few mistakes, but we made one big mistake, which was in order to get training data, we had this feature, which was repeat after me, the kids thing, repeat after me.
Yeah,
now, as kids, we should have known, that repeat after me has some side effects, which is, you get people to repeat after me.
Come on, you game it, even as a child,
exactly.
without the tag.
And so we had a bot attack in the first hour, where the old version of bots, we had a number of servers that started to teach Tay very bad things. Racist things, xenophobic things, anti-Semitic things. So Tay was learning all of these things and taking it in, and it became the training data. And so within an hour, it became a really bad piece of software.
Okay, so Tay launches. Big launch or
no,
more
very quiet. It was an incubation. It was just branded Tay, separate story on the name because we had some other issues with the name.
With Taylor Swift?
With Taylor Swift, yeah.
Really? Okay, with Taylor Swift. Okay.
That we didn't have to deal with that because we closed it down very quickly. But yeah, it was a big mistake, relatively speaking. But it was historical in the history of ChatGPT and conversational UIs. It was one of the big moment in its history. It was a failure.
Okay, so when we say fail fast, within an hour, as the product team behind it, it's failed, and then it takes 17 more hours to close down. And in practice, what's happening? This thing goes out on Twitter, and then 42 minutes in, it's saying things that I won't say on the podcast.
You can look it up for yourself on Wikipedia.
Okay. And that is, when you say a bot attack, just for the lay people, what does that mean in practice? It was not a nefarious actor?
No, it was a nefarious actor. So even today, you'll have bots out there, which are basically server farms that are pretending to be real people. And so, you see them today. There's bots on Twitter, bots on Facebook that pretend to be real people, and they're machines.
But someone's put them up to it.
Someone's put them up to it. Yeah. And then you can, because it's a machine, you'd have thousands of accounts on the server, all teaching or writing things on the internet. So that's what happened. Within an hour or two, Tay is learning. Takes a few hours for it to learn. And then, of course, the same people who've done the bot attack go in and ask Tay the questions that it's trained it to give certain answers to, screenshot it, and then start posting it out on the internet.
And is Tay known to be linked to Microsoft at this point?
No, well, it's not branded a Microsoft product because it's an incubation. But if you dig around, you can see that it's a project from Microsoft.
Okay, so someone's tweeting at Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft just released this racist
ABC
bot.
News or something. Okay, okay. And how bad was your day? Like, how does that play out for the teams back at home base?
Well, I mean, I would say the 24 hours from the moment you realize, you go through 3 stages. Stage 1 is get this thing stop, deal with this problem. It's a fire, put the fire out. So you're in firefighting mode. Then you go, okay, the fire is put out. And then you kind of, as you would, you say, what happened? Like, how did this happen? You're diagnosing the problem and trying to figure out, wow, okay, we made a mistake, but how did this happen? You figure out it was a bot attack, and you try to figure out who was it? How did they know it was coming? Because it was a silent release, and normally you put things out on the internet, nobody notices. So obviously someone knew. How did that happen? So you're doing the postmortem and trying to figure out, can we fix this and re-release it? Should we re-release this? I very quickly realized, no, it's an incubation. We're not re-releasing this. So that's stage 2. And then stage 3 is you have to face the consequences of, you've taken a risk. Sometimes they hit. Most of the time they flop. Sometimes they fail publicly in a big way. So, then you have to deal with that, explain to the rest of the company what went wrong, and go see the CEO and explain what happened, because, big PR disaster, I guess you'd call it.
Were you the sort of the point person?
Yeah, we came. There was a few of us. 7 a.m., go see the CEO.
7 a.m.
Yeah, first thing. It's a problem when you're the first thing in to see the headmaster.
Yeah.
But, one of the things about innovation is, and this is a leadership opportunity for anyone who's out there who is running a team doing incubation, things can go wrong. And the question as the leader of that organization, or CEO of a big company like Microsoft, is, what do you do? Because you can react in a number of ways. And I was so happy with the reaction of our CEO, because we came in, it's obviously a big problem. And the first question he asked was, what did we learn?
Not swearing.
No swearing. What did we learn? And that is someone who knows how to manage innovation, knows how to motivate a team, obviously hold us responsible because something's gone wrong. But first question, what did we learn?
And but he's also, I guess, thinking back to innovation, he's expecting you to have that answer.
Of course.
It would almost be worse if it had happened and you didn't have the answer than if it hadn't happened at all.
Yes. Now, was he happy with what we learned? He was happy with some parts of it, and he was unhappy with some parts of it, because we made a mistake, rookie mistake. Repeat after me. Come on. Rookie mistake. But he was very happy that we tried. He was very happy with the learnings about conversational UI, influenced a lot of the decisions that Microsoft have made over the subsequent years, investing in LLMs to make better technology, investing in conversational UI.
And when we think about the learning there's different levels, right? There's Derrick Connell and peers. What did you learn? And I presume you've taken something specific away from that on a very personal level. And then there's, what did the company learn with regards to innovation? And I think, what did the industry learn with regards to the experiment? So can you just talk us through those different levels?
Yeah. So what did I learn? I mean, I learned keep trying. The overall thing was a hit. I mean, there was interest in this product.
And did you work out how someone found out it was there like a leak?
Yeah, that would be my suspicion. We never found out exactly who, but we did. I have an idea where it came from, which part of the product it came from. But
you can tell me off mic.
Yeah.
But that's, I suppose, positive, because a leak means it's of interest. So
yes. I also learned that there's differences between China and the US. So context matters.
Yeah.
Because in China, for good or for bad, the country is very regulated on the internet usage. So therefore users have learned to become self-regulated. Whereas in the US, there is no self-regulation when it comes to what people do on the internet. But the part that was very positive was we learned that a conversational UI was a good direction to go.
Okay, but that point is so interesting. Your test group, essentially, which was the Chinese WeChat users, were self-regulating for cultural reasons.
Yes.
That you guys just didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Which, in hindsight's great. 2020.
Wow, of course.
You look back and go, of course we should have known that. But that's why we did the test, right? And you have to test these things and put them out there. And to be honest, without the repeat after me feature, it could have been interesting. But then we were a little gun shy after that, to do it. But certainly pursued the conversation UI.
And did you have repeat after me on in China?
No, because we had enough training data. So this is where sometimes when you're innovating, you have a problem to solve, and then you have to find a way to solve that problem. And then that's where that mistake came in. In China, there was just a lot of publicly accessible, high-quality training data with questions and answers on shopping sites and comparison sites, versus the US, it was not as good quality. So we thought, we'll put that feature in because it'll generate Q&A data that we could use for training.
And do you think the takeaway that it was an interesting product, that was an industry-wide takeaway, I presume?
Yeah, I think there was a few things that happened, because I know for sure, because we talked to people at Google and other companies, that the Tay is known. So people at OpenAI know about Tay. Conversational UI, we did a lot of work over the following 2-3 years out there just talking about conversational UI, weirdly talking to people in the Valley about China and introducing them to WeChat. I was amazed that people didn't know about WeChat in China in 2019.
Yeah.
But just talking about that UI model, so that has absolutely taken off. And like you look at Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, it's a conversational UI, and it's taken off big time. And then we also realized the underlying technology couldn't scale.
Okay.
So you could only do so much with Q&A data and machine learning before it just reached its limits of capability. And then the transformer technology was the big breakthrough. Transformers leading to LLMs. And now you have technology that you can combine with that conversational UI, and then you get ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. It's great.
And why is, to state the obvious, why isn't ChatGPT telling me racist things? Like, what's the correction that we've made there?
Yeah. Well, they learned that you need to put filters on, which is normal. It's like if you go do a Google search, it has filters that will, remove certain terms, not answer certain questions. And so the same technology is used. And then the training data it's the LLMs.
Yeah.
I mean, those things are phenomenal. So you have the data, you don't have to do these tricks.
But that's fixed, right? So if I test my technical knowledge.
Yeah, go for it, because you should know now, because you've got all these episodes where you've been learning.
Exactly, Hugh, listen up.
Yeah.
The training data is a whole process that happens before you release a new model.
Yep.
So it's fixed and therefore filtered, although interesting debate around where the line with filtering sits. But that's fixed, so it can't be disrupted in the same way that your Tay live training data was essentially like manipulated by these bots.
Yes. So there's two parts. There's the training data set. So with LLMs, it's everything that's public. And Mez talked about it 2 episodes ago. The entire web of human knowledge that's publicly available as its training data. But then the other part, which you talked about in the search session, is there's 2 parts. There's the signal we get from the questions that people are asking. Search is pretty clear. Search for something, you scroll the page, you click the third link, you go to the page and you don't come back. That's a strong signal that number 3 should have been number 1. So when you retrain the ranking model, you'll get number 3 in the number 1 position. You haven't changed the underlying training data, but you've changed the ranking model. Mm-hmm. So ChatGPT can use that signal that here's the questions people are asking. They asked a follow-on question. They asked a third question. They say thank you. And that signal that this conversation was useful and the answers the model gave were good, so we can retrain the ranking model for the
which will
results.
Be more of a live training.
Yeah, they can do that pretty quickly.
Okay.
The underlying model gets updated less frequently, but understanding the question that the user's asking and then reaching in. I mean, you're reaching into billions of documents to pull out the relevant answer. So if you answer the question incorrectly the first time, we got that wrong. You got it right the second time, you can retrain. And then when you reach in, you pull out the right answer.
And if there was a lesson for the industry on ethics and AI, let's call it, and you're training a model, an LLM, with all the data from the internet, do they filter out the bad content from the internet, or are they filtering at the point of the user interaction?
Yeah, there's a few places that filtering happens. I mean, the whole thing gets filtered in some ways. I mean, take Google as an example. Let's go back to search. They call it the dark web, but Google knows about everything. Mm-hmm. It knows about all the websites that exist that it can crawl. There's websites that exist behind firewalls, enterprise website, doesn't know about those. It knows there's something there, but it can't get access to it. But it knows about everything out there. And then it chooses which subset it's going to go crawl and make a copy of. I know you were surprised to hear that it's a copy, but it goes and gets that copy, but it's a subset. So that's filtering because it's choosing which ones to bring back. It's choosing how often to go back and get a fresh copy. So that's filtering. So that's on the index side. It's choosing what information to bring back. The answers you see, if you type sports questions, they've chosen which types of answers they're going to give. So again, they're filtering which sports you can see. You might not get women's cricket, but you might get men's soccer. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, there's something happening there. It's filtering. Mm-hmm. That's on the index side. LLMs are different because it's got everything. Yeah. But it's also, they have to manage their cost too. So they're also going to choose which subset of documents they're going to use for their models. So you're going to get a subset. It's still pretty big.
Yeah.
Then on the question side, the filtering we did, and Hugh and I worked on this together, let's say on image and video search. Yeah. You have to choose, as a question gets asked to you, you have to decide, what is this question? What's it likely to be? And one of the first things you will decide is this a legal question or not? And that's a really important decision.
As in legal versus illegal.
Yes.
Okay.
You can imagine types of things that people might be asking that are...
I don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to choose
Yeah.
whether or not the question is something we should answer.
Yeah.
And then there are things that are more sensitive. Like if someone types, how would I commit suicide?
Yeah.
And that's a question that you have to treat very sensitively.
Yes.
And you're not going to tell them.
Yeah.
You're going to give them help.
Yeah.
And so you're choosing to answer, but not in the way that they've asked the question. You're interpreting it. And so that's a good thing to do. So you're always doing filtering, classification, and those are all very sophisticated models that are using lots of deep learning to figure out what is this question? Should I answer it? And then how should I answer it? Should I give the user an answer or give them advice? And LLMs are the same.
And just to take us back to your Tay disaster and the learnings, was the pivot point for the industry on ethics and AI around Tay, or did that conversation exist and this sort of played into what not to do?
Well, that's a good question, because 2 weeks later, one of the big insights for Satya, the CEO at the time, was, okay, we made a mistake. We learned a lot of things. One of the things we learned was we don't have a set of AI guidelines. We decided to call it ethics. And there was a whole bunch of senior people got together, some legal people, PR people, marketing people, engineering people, Satya, and came up with Microsoft's first set of AI ethics, which 2 weeks after Tay, we announced. And
to the world, internally, externally, okay.
Yeah, we created them and announced them because it was a good opportunity where it was in the news, people were listening.
Well, and a good PR redemption arc, I suppose.
Yeah, and also Satya is a great leader because he thought this is a good opportunity for us to actually do the right thing, like produce a set of ethics, some guidelines. They were adopted by the industry.
So the industry, you think, didn't have much of a finger on the pulse on that stuff before? No,
because at the time, how many real AI products were out there? I mean,
fair enough.
You could say search was an AI product, but it wasn't using LLMs because they didn't exist at the time. But it did have the most sophisticated machine learning. Mm-hmm. Google and Microsoft had a lot of that. Amazon had some machine learning, but there wasn't a lot of actual AI products at the time. I mean, now we're thinking, of course, everything's an AI product. But even 10 years ago, there was one product that was AI, which was search. Mm-hmm. And then everything else was kind of a little bit AI, but not much.
And you're quite relaxed about the mistake, as it were. Because of the learning opportunity and because it was pretty well managed. Was there any point in that whole period where you were really like...
No, I don't want to appear nonchalant about it, but with AI, you have to think about the potential damage.
Yeah.
And you think about Tay, nobody was hurt. Nobody was physically hurt. It wasn't a product that somebody could get injured, like self-driving cars. Mm-hmm. There's a potential for someone to get hurt. Like if you're building a self-driving car, that's a real consideration that somebody might get physically injured. Now, I know there will be people who use Tay who were upset, and that was a problem, but they weren't physically hurt. The company didn't lose any money. We had no revenue associated.
And you shut it down quickly, which I guess is...
We shut it down in 18 hours.
Yeah.
And then didn't bring it back again. So yeah, okay, a company like Microsoft, it's a PR problem, but we're big boys. We can take the hit. So that's why I look back and go, yeah, it was a mistake, but it forced us to think about the ethics of AI, not hurting people, not damaging people, being mindful about the guidelines, the governance. Even today, I was advising a company and they talked about the person who's their responsible AI leader. And every company now has either an AI ethics team or a responsible AI officer, and that's good. Yeah. Someone who's thinking about what damage could we do with AI and be mindful about it, put some guardrails in place, learn from the mistake we made, which is unexpected things will happen unless you plan for it. So mistakes will happen, not might happen. So be careful.
Be careful, but I guess it's good to go early with something small and experimental because you can take a learning that can be applied 100 times over to everything that goes next.
Yeah. We were doing hundreds of experiments every month, trying new things because we were up against Google.
Yeah.
We weren't expected to win. We didn't. But, there's no reason why we should have. They had a dominant position. So we were forced to innovate. It was great.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
I'll tell you, some say, wouldn't you have rather have been at Google at the time, like working for Google? And I know Hugh mentioned he had an offer from Google in 99 and I had one in 2001. But no, because I competed against Google for a long time. So this might feel like being competitive, which it probably is. But we had to be innovative.
And scrappy almost,
We had to be scrappy.
Yeah.
We were 1/3 in terms of the number of people. We had a lot of people. The rest of people at Microsoft used to say we were too big. 4,500 people are like, oh. how many people. Then well, Google were 15,000, so we were small, and they had money to spend on bigger indexes and et cetera. But we had to be scrappy, which meant we had to innovate. We had to find ways to have an index as good as Google's with less money. We had to find ways to be better at ranking in some places. And, we were competing, we were innovating. And then we had to find ways to introduce new products. We were like, we had to, which was, I think, more fun than being the guy on top watching us and kind of having to react to what we did. Whereas they had their business model and they were steadily just going out there and using it and making some good money. But I don't know, were they innovating as much? I don't think so, but...
Well, innovation comes out of problem solving, and if your competitor's got 90% market share,
you bet. I mean, look at Gemini. But look at Gemini right now. You know, why is ChatGPT or Claude the most used product by consumers? Why isn't Gemini? It's a great product. They have much bigger data set. They have lots of users. Why? Because they're protecting their search business. So I would not like to be on the Gemini team because you're out there thinking, we could be number one.
And any other, before we leave this Tay topic, any other big learnings, either personally or that you took to your next projects?
I mean, I mentioned them, but just to summarize, I think there's the leadership. If you're leading an innovation team, your range needs to be, we could hit, but you also need to be aware of the fact that it could be a huge failure. And if you restrict your innovation to safe, and then if you are leading that team, when you fail, I hope that I would be the leader who would say, what did you learn? As the first question.
Not who do I fire?
Who do I fire? Screaming and roaring. It's like, what did you... I mean, I still to this day think that is one of the single best questions I was ever asked in a moment like that. When only a handful of people would ask that question. Great question. So leadership. I'm going to quote Mez, who was on 2 weeks ago. He said he's an AI optimist. I am too, because those experiments showed that there is a new interaction model. And how cool is that? I mean, come on. I mean, if you'd asked somebody 10 years ago, will you ever not use Google search?
Not 10 years ago.
5 years ago. 2 years ago. You would say, of course not, because it's perfect. It's like brushing my teeth. Why would I change? It's perfect for the job. And now the world has changed. There's something better. And that's great. I mean, come on. As we progress, this technology is getting better and better. And then the third learning is we do need to be careful. For the people who are AI optimists like I am, you can be optimistic and innovate on the edges, but be careful. And think about what's the worst thing that could happen. And that's the thing to be careful about, which is if you have the potential to hurt people, be very careful. Is what you're doing going to, cause a lot of people to lose their jobs? Be careful, be thoughtful, be mindful.
And do you think that the big LLM players, the OpenAIs of the world, are leading or cognizant of some of those questions when you talk about people's jobs? It's an interesting discussion.
Of course, they're thinking about it. But they're not the ones who are thinking about it the most because they're more of a platform. It's all the people building, all these apps that are getting built now in enterprise. If you're a lawyer, you're probably thinking, is there a company, a startup that's coming along that's going to disrupt the legal business where people can get access to legal advice without needing to come to a human? And then do we need more lawyers? Do we need less lawyers? I mean, those are questions that startup will hopefully think about, but there's money to be made. There's a business opportunity. I could solve a lot of problems. I could democratize access.
Well, I was going to say, actually, there's two sides to everything because democratizing access to things that sit behind a paid service does have benefit. I think Mez talked about this a little bit in the episode last week. So it's a difficult line to walk.
But the world changes. We used to ride horses. And then we drove cars. Now we're in driverless cars like Waymo. I think Hugh was using them exclusively.
He's a big Waymo fan at the minute,
and then what's next? Who knows? So things change and humans adapt to that change. And we just have to be mindful of, mostly it would be for the governments to think about for its population, what's going to change, what could happen for our industries, for our people, so that we're part of this and that we're training people for the future. The worst thing you could do is stick your head in the sand and pretend that nothing's changing. For the next 5 years, apps are going to come out. I built 4 apps yesterday.
Wow,
not sure any of them are good.
Even for you, that's pretty good going, isn't it?
But I when I talk about innovation, is it a hit or a flop? It's probably somewhere in the middle.
I
haven't done anything interesting yesterday, but the fact that I could do 4 apps in parallel, I just sent them off and they got built by AI, and then I had them at the end of the day. It was great. So maybe one of them will be a hit.
And just back to Tay, Because I did do my research, because as you say, this was a moment
that
the world noticed.
Yeah.
It didn't end on that day in March, did it? There was a little bit of a hiccup a couple weeks later.
It was a dark moment, and it did come back to life. It was like a zombie, coming back from the depths of hell, climbing out.
In your dreams.
It was late at night. We were, we were down at San Francisco. In fact, it was the next day Satya was going to announce our ethics. And
so Tay's happened.
Yep.
We've learned. Yeah, we turned it off. We've learned, and actually pretty quickly those ethical guidelines were spun up by the business, that's great. Yeah. But the day before it's being launched to not just the business, to the world, it comes back from the dead.
It woke up about 10:30 p.m. and then we were told about it an hour later. I got a call. I thought it was a joke. Tay is back online.
Did you think it was corporate sabotage?
No, I at that moment at 11:30 p.m. I thought, I don't want to swear, but I was like, WTF.
Yeah.
It's like 11:30. I thought it was a joke. I honestly thought someone was pranking me. So I get online and lo and behold, there it is.
There it is.
And so it's like, what the heck? And so, we gathered a few people, head of PR, a couple of people got together.
Because you were in this, at least you were in the same place, because you're at
Thankfully, we were in the same place.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have mattered where we were in the world. We would have been on the phone call together. Okay. But luckily, we got together, sitting in a hotel room on my bed with a little speaker phone on the bed. We got in touch with the developer in China, who, lo and behold, had decided to turn the server back on to diagnose the code, but not realize that when he turned it back on, it automatically reconnected to Twitter. And
then someone noticed, and the press were monitoring. And so you guys found out via the press that it was back online.
Someone tweeted it. Tay is back. Return of Tay. And we got on the phone, and by the time we got in touch with this developer, and it's like, what the heck is going on over there? He's like, what are you talking about? I said, it's back online.
And how do you get it offline?
Well, I gave the instruction: go to the wall, find the power, plug it out, turn that thing off.
And that's enough.
It's done. It was on one server.
Okay.
And it was done. Time of death, 1:38 a.m.
Oh my gosh. And why couldn't he unplug it at 10:34 or whatever?
Well, he didn't know it was back online. He was just sitting at his machine looking at the code.
Oh my gosh.
Hadn't realized that it connected back to Twitter.
That's a bad day for him.
Yeah. What I asked him was, what did you learn?
Yeah. Okay. Derrick, you have a book coming out this week or next week at the time of recording. Yep. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's a different kind of book. So since I stopped working full-time for Microsoft, I've started pursuing a whole bunch of things that I didn't have time to do when I was working, because you know what it's like. You're working 80 hours a week, 7 days a week, you're just working, which is fun. But the book is called 21 Summers. It's co-authored with Thomas Werner, who's a guy I met. He's a New York Film Academy professor of photography and fine arts. And when we met, we realized, I think he was dreading meeting me because, I went there to do a photography workshop. So I love fashion photography.
Okay.
Weirdly. And I went there for a workshop and was working with him one-to-one, and he heard there's this tech exec coming from Microsoft, wants to learn about, photography. He told me later that he was dreading it, but within an hour, I was telling, we started asking me something about technology. I was like, oh yeah, your most personal relationship is with your search engine. And he was fascinated.
Well, you told me that earlier, and it's really rung true with me. There is nothing more personal than my Google search history.
You should always be aware of the fact that the most personal relationship in your life is with your search engine.
Well, maybe it's now with my LLM of choice.
Maybe. I don't think so yet. I don't think the user model... I have a feeling that user model, the conversational model, is more like a human conversation.
So you self-regulate.
You self-regulate because you're expressing yourself the way you would to another person. It's not anthropomorphic, but it feels a bit like that. So I still think the search engine is the place you go.
The cold 3-word search.
The cold 10 blue links with
Okay. So sorry, we digress.
Oh no, it's okay. But then we realized that we had a lot in common, even though he's a professor of fine arts and photography and I'm a tech guy. And then we started talking about pursuing dreams and the things I wanted to do and the things he wanted to do. So we decided to work on this book about exactly that. It's called 21 Summers because, when you're a kid, 18, you're thinking about the summers that the big things you do during the summer, go traveling or take up a new skill or whatever it might be. But it's like 3 months of just go do something, pursue it with vigor and energy and passion. And when you think about our life, it's fixed. We're all exiting the same way.
Yep.
And, in reality, we've probably got 21 of those left. So every time you miss an opportunity to pursue one of those 21, it just gets ticked off,
Yeah.
19, 18, 17.
I spent the last summer of my life in Cincinnati, Ohio. So you've given me some thoughts
Exactly.
for thought. That
And
was
so
one of my 21.
That was one of your 21s. And was it the one you would have chosen?
It was interesting.
It was interesting,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. An adventure.
But I realized that I had been self-regulating. I mean, when I got into fashion photography, I was telling myself, nobody else was stopping me.
Yeah.
Nobody. Of course, I could do it.
Yeah.
But I was telling myself all these reasons why I shouldn't. I'm a tech guy. No one expects me to be a fashion photographer. So we went down and we talked to about 17 different people around the world, different kinds of people, EMTs, artists,
wow.
a lady in Africa who runs an NGO, a Buddhist makeup artist from Japan. And the thing that came out was that most people, there's nothing stopping them from pursuing their dreams apart from these blind spots, we call them, the voices in your head giving you reasons not to do it. So we just explored that idea in the book, look at the blind spots, and then give some examples of people who have overcome those blind spots in their life, some techniques for overcoming them, so that the goal is to get people moving so that they can have a fun life.
And you're going to be spending one of your summers, I presume, on a book tour. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, actually, the book is a 21 summer for me, like just publishing a book, being an author. I'll be an author next week. By the time this is published, I will be an author, which I wasn't before.
Yeah.
So that's a 21 summer. But I'm going to Turkey, going to Istanbul for 2 months on a fashion photography residency.
Wow.
That's another 21. Yeah, and the book, this idea of just go for it, get out of your own way. There's lots of other reasons that you can't do things, but don't limit yourself.
Yeah. And can the listeners find your photography anywhere?
Oh, yeah, on my Instagram.
On your Instagram,
my Instagram is dedicated to my photography.
And what's the tag?
It's at Derrick_Connell.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, very simple.
Okay, great. That's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can find us on socials, including LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok. We're on YouTube. And of course, you can go to techoverflowpodcast.com. See you next week.